I'm in the wrong shot. Good start. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Hey.
Aha! Look at that. This is the Team Objection Podcast for, November 16th, 2021, episode 506. Going live continues to present challenges because, I'm always working right beforehand, so it's a little delayed. But here we are.
It's more fun this way.
Yeah, we're scrambling, but that's part of the live experience. Sometimes the way I sit, my arms don't look like they're level. Like, look at what's happening with my sleeves right now for the video people. What is this?
It looks like you're tailored your shirt very badly.
Yeah, like I don't understand how to wear clothes. Just get the arm out of the frame. I don't know. Anyways,
We're both wearing Zelda shirts because in my case, it was the closest thing I had to a Metroid. And I felt like, in honor of the Metroid review, by the way, we're reviewing Metroid Dread, if you couldn't tell from the title, if you're listening on the radio or whatever people listen on. I don't have a Metroid shirt. I have a Metroid Shadow Box.
That's right. Did I get that one for you? I
Yes,
think I did. Yeah.
because it's beseeching the Chozo.
Yeah, it was too perfect when I came across it.
Yeah.
I think that actually might be what the first photo is, too, in the top right when we get to it. I don't remember if she's kneeling, though. I don't remember why I put this one on this morning. I think this is just one of the shirts I like, and I didn't really think about it as far as the show went, but here we are.
We had a major faux pas. We were wearing the same shirt. Unplanned. Yeah. You can't do that.
It's partially my fault. I think they're slightly different colors, but they're effectively the same. I kind of got everybody a version of this shirt. I think Michaela's and Maisie's were different colors. Like one was white and whatever. But that was one of the Christmas gifts last year. We all got Triforce Glyph shirts, but then it meant that we had the trap and we were wearing the same clothes.
We did. Yeah. We were. You know who's not wearing the clothes? Dave. Because he's a piece of shit.
Wow.
He doesn't feel the worth. He didn't feel it was worth it to play Metroid Dread or show up today.
He was actually going to be here today if we weren't doing this. So this is not, he's missing. He didn't play Metroid Dread, though. There's no way around that. But he would have been here if we had been doing a topic he had some familiarity with. Of course, if we always did topics that Dave had familiarity with, we would run out in about 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, he knows nothing. And this is a great game. I mean, we're going to get into it. I'm going to hold my horses. Pace yourself.
All right, well, let's get into it, though, because we got a lot to get to, and I think the biggest bulk of this time is going to come from this topic. Because, look, we have the thing on the right-hand side that tells you what's coming up. There is a story in this game, and we'll talk about it. There are some other things, like, some new items and the graphics compared to past games. Like, there's a little bit of everything to get to, but I think the majority of it falls under this category, and there's two key reasons for that. She is not beseeching the Chozo. She's just standing, so I've ruined everything.
She's demanding from the Chozo
now. Yeah, she's
now.
kind of trained on him.
She's
the
over
arm
it.
blaster's ready to go.
Yeah, 8 games now of beseeching. She's like, I'm done beseeching. I'm going to take what I want.
Not to mention it's the Chozo that seemed to be fucking her up this time. We'll get to that when we get to story. But gameplay-wise, I mean, this is our first 2D Metroid in effectively 15 years or so. Yes, there's like Samus Returns, the remake, and there's some other stuff in there, but the first brand new 2D Metroid game since Fusion, which I think was 2006. So a decade and a half. You can see some of the elements of Samus Returns here. Of course, the counter is the most prominent of those. What did you think about just the way the game felt? How Samus controlled? Let's start there, and then we'll expand from that.
So what's fun about this, a lot of times when we do reviews, I spend some time thinking about it, going over my talking points, and really coming prepared. And I didn't do that at all this time. So this is all going to be off the cuff, just my exact impressions. This is the fastest Metroid that we've ever had, and I think we can easily say that. I mean, the 3D is never going to compete in this realm, but even like Fusion and Returns, they added some things to help speed up the gameplay. This was so fast, and I was watching friend of the show, Doug, who's not here. No, he is. Okay, we'll get to his comments in a second. I was watching him play, and I was like, oh my god, is this like Sonic the Hedgehog? The way that she moves and the abilities that they have to get her around the environment, from the early dash, what do you call it? When you crouch slide, the slide, down to the flash thing where she
flash shift, yeah.
Man, singular. Probably the best upgrade they made, in my opinion, because it's so useful. I used it primarily in boss fights. It was invaluable there. It controlled like a dream. It was like they took the old Metroid of the Metroidvania type, which I shouldn't call it Metroidvania because it's just Metroid.
Metroid, yeah.
Yeah, of like finding the different items, but then they added that fluidity of the movement, and so it was. They revolutionized, I thought, this type of gameplay again.
Yeah, we can talk about specific items in a bit, but since you brought it up, I thought the phase shift was something that just made complete sense. When I picked that up, I was like, that's interesting. They kind of have you use it to like avoid a floor trap to get out of the room because, new Metroid item, got to teach you how to use it. I was like, okay, that's something, I guess. I assumed it was going to be like the Phantom Cloak, where it was like, all right, you just have to use this to go through some doors. But instead, like you said, it gave you a lot of movement utility. In boss fights for dodging, it almost seems expected. Mm-hmm. Like some of those encounters are built where there's attacks where it's like you need to be using this either to get across the room quickly or to jet back and forth to dodge quickly, depending on the attack. And then for movement, which is really where this game excels and where more recent Metroid games have excelled, yeah, I mean, it's bar none because you can use it in so many interesting ways, Just like in Mario Odyssey, where I thought the controls were the tightest it's ever been for a Mario game, this is the same idea where now it's like, okay, so we're going to spin boost because we don't have the screw attack yet. So we're going to spin boost into a second jump, and then we're going to phase shift this way, and then we're going to wall kick off of that, and then we're going to grab this ledge, and like everything just feels really good, and it progresses in, I think, a pretty nice way overall.
And you didn't even touch on the shine sparking, which is crazy. So that kind of gets to something. So you have like these shine spark puzzles, and you have sequence breaking, right? Which has always been a part of Metroid, but this time clearly the developers were like, we know what's going to happen, and we're kind of designing for it. You get certain animations that you wouldn't get otherwise, but like they knew you were going to sequence break, and they put it in there, and I just thought it was so smartly built. And yeah, I've never they made it so, I mean, it's difficult. It's a tough game for sure.
Yeah.
But they made it to where newbies could have fun, but if you're an advanced Metroid player, I've seen some crazy stuff on the internet. It's insane.
So I just beat this last week. The next thing I'm most excited to do, especially knowing that there's a new Games Done Quick Marathon coming up, is to see what the speedruns look like. Because speedruns, in addition to being so execution heavy, you'll get to see all sorts of movement options that are supposed to be done. You'll also see all the sequence breaking. In fact, too much of it, more than ever a casual player will ever do.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see in what ways the game was meant to be broken, because they built those in, as you mentioned, and in which ways it was not meant to be broken, but because of this fluidity of movement, there's even more options at people's disposal. I think that's going to be really cool.
So let me ask you kind of controversial things. The first is in Samus Returns, the countering, people felt like it was a little too dependent on it. And I would say that's definitely the case here. Again, is the game is built where if you're trying to chip away every enemy, it's going to take forever. Whereas if you counter, you get to kill them quick and you get all the bonus health and missiles. Were you okay with that? Or were you like, I kind of miss the old days where you just blast away?
I think I'm okay with it overall. I will say, because the counter is strong, I think it's a little less good than it was in Samus Returns, the remake, but it does feel like your beam is sort of just neutered half the time. And even when you get an upgrade, like you get the charge beam, and that, I mean, you hit a little harder, sure, and eventually you get like wave and the Spazar, whatever they call it in this game, the light beam. Yeah. The plasma beam in particular, plasma used, like in Super Metroid, plasma is like hugely important. It takes your damage through the roof on your beam. Here it was like, oh, you got the plasma beam. You're still basically not going to hit much harder than you did before. Mm-hmm. So that's a small complaint I would have. I don't know if I felt like the counters were too possible. And towards the end of the game, if anything, I was using missiles more frequently because all the missile upgrades are stacked on top of each other. So that just kept getting stronger.
Yep.
So our counter's a little bit too strong, maybe, but I honestly wasn't countering much in the latter third of the game. I did a lot in the beginning, almost out of necessity, but not so much later.
Yeah. I want to go through the comments really quick. Just Michaela saying it's fast and fluid. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Doug agreeing that it's super fast and echoing our ideas on the speed runs. And then, yeah, Chakrock, like, I died so much. And we're going to get to the Emmy stuff in a second because that's where the majority of my deaths were. But it was just like, I think you bring up a good point. That you died more in this than in all your other Metroid games put together. And that is absolutely the case. And it's probably like double. It was just constantly dead.
And it doesn't feel that punishing. And this sort of relates to the Emmys, which we'll talk about separately because it deserves its own little bullet point in this section. But in those cases, you always had these save points when you went in and out of the zones, like auto saves. So that when you did get killed by the Emmys, and everybody's going to get killed by the Emmys except the speedrunners who are fucking freaks.
Yeah.
That you would just pop back out of the zone and be like, all right, well, that didn't work. Let me try this route or this approach or whatever, right? But even then, like, there's enough save points scattered throughout and auto saves before boss fights, which is another place you could die, that yeah, it's challenging, but it feels like it rewards you for getting better at the game, which is sort of the same formula that works for the Dark Souls and all the other things of that nature, where it's like, yeah, you're going to probably get killed, but the goal is to learn from that death and not get killed the same way again, and then eventually you beat the fight because you've run out of ways to die. I like that feedback loop. Not everybody does.
Well, and we keep saying we're going to get to it, and I don't want to get to it yet because you brought me a transition to the boss fights, which is the other kind of hot take I had of, I think this is easily the best boss fights in the series.
Yeah, and easily, not to skip ahead too much, but easily the best final boss fight in the series, and it's not even that close.
No, because, sometimes Metroid, you get into, like, slugfests, and that can be fun, and it kind of rewards you in the previous games for just loading up on missiles. But there was something really satisfying about actually, like, learning the patterns of the boss, and like you said with the final boss, I thought I was going to be so frustrated, but it really, like, rewards what you've learned to that point, and you feel like a badass, like zipping around, screw jumping around him on his attacks, and just really satisfying.
Yeah, and I almost wish there was like DLC because you can't be fully powered Samus the whole time. The whole progression is the point, or at least half the point of the series, but you don't often have a chance to flex with a fully powered Samus. Like Super Metroid, which is the one I would go back to all the time because it's one of my favorites. That Mother Brain fight kind of sucks. Story-wise, it's interesting. It's not like it's a bad finale, but all you do is sit there and blast away at its head, and it has a couple of attacks to dodge, and the Metroid shows up, you get the fancy beam, you shoot the Mother Brain till it's dead, and you escape. This fight has the 3 different phases, a bunch of different layers, new attacks to learn, and it forces you to use different things that you've accumulated along the way. You got to use power bombs for something. You got to use missiles and pour them into him. You got to have the melee counter for a phase transition. Like, it really utilizes everything you had in a way that I think this franchise needs to do more of going forward.
Yeah. Well, and so I love the boss fights. They were hard. The regular enemies were hard. Like, if you're not careful, you could easily just die from the normal dudes just hitting you repeatedly. But I also love that, and it's weird that I love this because I typically don't. I don't have as much time anymore. I like to kind of know where I'm going in a game. But I found the exploration and the lack of hand-holding on where to go next really fun and satisfying. I realized sometimes when I went to explore, they kind of lock you into certain paths at different points. I don't know if you experienced that. I was like, I'm ready to go take this power and go backwards. And like they design it to where you can't. So at times you're railroaded a little bit, but certainly, some of the least hand-holding in the series, and I really appreciated that.
I think when you look at this overall map, it's hard not to be impressed. I mean, it dwarfs pretty much anything else in the series. It's almost so intricately put together that it feels contrived in like a big picture step back in lore way. Like when you really look at the route you would take, like the old Family Circus cartoon with the dotted line where he's running all over the fucking place. That's kind of like that here, where there were times where I was like, oh, so I got this upgrade, so now I'm going to go through this teleporter and then this elevator, and conveniently, the upgrade I have is right there where I pop out. It makes perfect sense from a game design standpoint. I had no qualms with it. It felt great. When I took a step back, I was like, why would the world be set up this way? Why would this ever happen?
Yeah, Samus being like the luckiest bounty hunter in history. It's
Yeah.
like, well, good thing this is here. You'd really be screwed, wouldn't you?
Oh, I need the screw attack to get out of this room. Well, I just got it, so I guess it's good, or I'd starve to death. Cool. To your other point, though, like the exploration felt really good, partly because the movement felt good. So traversing felt like a reward and a thing that you wanted to do, not a chore. I didn't spend a lot of time going backwards. If there was other stuff in the nearby area as I came back through a place, I would go pick it up. But I actually kind of saved most of it until the end when I had most of the upgrades and really had a fun time just backtracking and picking things up. I didn't feel like I needed it to progress.
I usually do that. So my rule of thumb on any games, Metroidvania or otherwise, really, I just wait till the end because I think it's so frustrating to go back and be like, oh, well, I can get this thing, but then you discover like 8 other things. Like, well, I don't have that yet, so I'm gonna have to come back anyway. So I just wait until I have it all, or at least relatively close to that, and then I do it. How many missiles did you have by the end?
I had 91% of the items when I beat it. I didn't care to 100% it. But I went through and went to each region when I had all the items and just tried to be pretty thorough. So yeah. I think I had in the 250, 260 range.
Oof, nice. So you just loaded up the final boss with missiles.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, the missile burst thing was handy because I wasn't worried about the ammo for it, so I could just pour them into him when he had an opening.
Yeah, that's what I did. Whereas Doug was talking about like having such a hard time. To be fair, he didn't look anything up. You probably didn't either. I did. When I get to the third phase, I was like, okay, like what's his movement here, just so I can expect it. So I don't want to go back and redo the whole thing, and that helped. I'll admit it. Maybe I suck, but I had the storm missile just killing him. Doug had 130, so he was for sure running out because I was running out at 190. So that probably made it hard too. Yeah, the missiles were great, but I felt like I was rewarded for really going back and finding those missiles and energy tanks. I love that. So I played other Metroids where you get the energy tanks and it's almost just to experience the game, do the exploration and find it. Now I felt like it was imperative to my success. And that was such a cool feeling.
Yeah, at first I thought maybe the damage was a little bit too high. It just felt like there was a transition point around a third of the game, maybe a little bit before, where enemies are taking off entire energy tanks, and I have 3 of them or 2. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, I remember I stumbled upon a secret room in like the third area, and there was a big enemy in it, and I kicked his ass finally. I died like 4 times, kept coming back. And I couldn't even get the item in the room. So I was like, God damn it, this guy's beating the shit out of me. And now I don't have the power bomb I need to get or whatever it was. So I thought maybe I was going to be a little frustrated by that. But the truth is the suit upgrades help when you finally get them. I'll have more on that in a minute. And then you eventually get enough energy tanks that you can like withstand it. You know, and you get enough stuff back from countering or killing things that helps. And there's plenty of enemies around that drop stuff. And to your point on the final boss, to me, and maybe people did do this, maybe they didn't, I was power bombing every one of those black holes, the regular ones and the big ones.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And those dropped plenty of, like, I guess, more ammo that I needed to get through the fight. I mean, I had more to start with, but...
Actually, I don't know if I did the red sun ones for sure.
I think those were required or they hurt like hell, but
yeah,
you could do it on the regular ones, too.
Oh, nice.
So every time you drop one of those, I'm like, cool, I'm going to power bomb this, and you do that stupid, like... light beam attack, and I would just be finishing the power bomb animation and roll underneath him. And
God, countering him though is so. We're talking a lot about the final boss, which was funny. A lot of the bosses were really fun. I thought the first one was quite the introduction. Going back, that was one of the ones I struggled with the most. But still great and super fun.
Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if the brain type things that eventually give you the mega beam were supposed to be bosses. The first one felt like it, maybe because you just had so little options at your disposal, and then by the end they felt trivial. But you know, but then the main bosses, it's cool to see Kraid back. He's going to be in one of the pictures later. Like, hey, great, it's Kraid. Once again, he's relegated to early boss status. So you just kind of fuck him up. And I've seen that just like in Super Metroid, there's a way to quick kill him, which I appreciate the tradition. I remember I actually was exploring, and I went back into that room, and there's a morph ball launcher in that room, and I'm like, why is this here? I couldn't. I was looking for like an item for it, and then I remembered he has this hole in his stomach, and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
So if you have bombs here, you can fuck him up probably.
Well, so you brought this up in a way, talking about the suit, and maybe this will transition you back to the suits. Do we need levels with water anymore?
Well, that's one of my main complaints about this game is it takes way too long to get the fucking gravity suit.
Yeah.
Adam mentions that as you're going through one of the maps type station things where he checks in with you around a third of the way through, and you don't get it till another third later. And in that time, you're going through so many different water points and seeing upgrades you can't get. I didn't mind it for a while, but by the end, I'm like, when we finally got it, I'm like, well, here it is. It's about goddamn time.
Yeah, and the problem, again, I understand it from a game development perspective, but moving in the water is such a slog. And there's huge sections of it. You're just underwater. And in a game where the dichotomy between how fast you can move outside of the water and then being in the water has never been greater than now. So you really felt it. And that's one thing I went back. It's like, I get what they're doing. I hate this level, though. Can we just never do water again?
And if it was just that one section where you had to go through a thoroughly underwater area and then get the suits that you felt, I wouldn't have cared. Like the very end, when you got it, you had to kind of traverse this whole entire underwater section. I wouldn't have hated that on its own. But before that, you spend another 3 hours of time going in and out of water areas. And they're like, well, now you have the spin boost, so you can jump twice when you're underwater, but you can't get any extra height. And now you have, not the screw attack, the one before it, the space jump. So now you can go multiple times across the water, but you can't get any extra height. And I'm like, you are just prolonging what should not be happening right now. That's all.
Exactly.
So that was my one major pet peeve, is I'm like, gravity suit, I don't know what the hell is happening here, but it's taking way too long.
Soma's here. Glad to have you.
What
Glad
up?
you made it. And a lot of the comments are just kind of catching up. But the comment on, the morph ball, I
liked it.
I didn't. Yeah, I was actually going to say that because of the slide, but that was part of it. It was weird to me though, because that's always back.
It's like the first one.
Back to going all
original
the way to the
NES
first
Metroid.
Game. Yep. It's like always the first or second power up that you get
in Prime. It's one of the very early ones.
Yeah, this is pretty bold to have it so late, but I actually kind of thought it worked, and in some ways, it makes you appreciate it more when you do get it because it had become so perfunctory at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of made it nice.
It's almost akin to like having to get Link's sword in a way, like you almost expect it to be attached at the hip. I saw those complaints. I can see it. I certainly wouldn't have wanted to push it back almost any further than that. I think it has to be an early game item because it just doesn't do enough on its own. But I actually kind of liked it. It was kind of weird. I'm like, like I can see I clearly need a morph ball to go through here. The slide's not big enough to go across here, but don't have it yet. So I kind of liked it.
Fun fact, I was listening to a podcast, like a gameography about Metroid, and they spent all this time being like, how does the morph ball work? It's so stupid. Doesn't she get crushed?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, in Metroid Prime, they address that.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, they basically just say it's ancient Chozo crazy technology, but the space pirates spent a lot of time and money trying to replicate it, and they just like destroy themselves. So I thought that was clever. Fun fact for you for the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, this game is all about the progression, the exploration we talked about. The morph ball, one of many ways they gated your progress. So was the gravity suit. I mean, almost everything is. When you look at the item, there's sometimes a way to like need it somewhere. And the suits serve that same function to kind of go full circle here. I mean, yeah, you can't go into the hot area without the various suit. You can't go into the cold area without the gravity suit. It doesn't ever feel like it's too oppressive, though. There are definitely times where you have a Metroidvania-esque game where it's like you said, there's too many things you can't do. I never really felt that here. I could definitely see a spot. It's like, oh, I'm going to have the gravity suit. I can't jump high enough, but there's an item there. Well, all right, we'll come back later. But it wasn't like there was a ton at a time.
And there was no, I realized this, one of the big upgrades, too, was there was no spider ball, right? I'm not crazy. No spider ball in this game.
Nope.
Spider ball is cool, at least you think. But from a gameplay perspective, it's awful because it moves so slow. And you're tempted to try it in like every room with a high ceiling. So you spend like probably a playtime of like 2 to 3 hours in every run, just like going on the ceiling. So there's a lot of smart decisions that really like made the gameplay snappy, and I loved it.
That was probably better suited for the 3D ones anyways. There were some fun puzzles across the Prime games that made use of that, but yeah, in 2D, I just don't feel like it's necessary.
No.
Whereas we had the Morph Ball launcher, which was really just something you needed bombs for, and was never like the most exciting, but it was quick, so it didn't overstay its welcome. It's, I can get across this area now. Great, cool, bye.
Yeah, absolutely. So have we come to Emmy?
I think we have to. Yeah, we've sort of been circling around it, but
right.
The progression enemy in the room is the Emmys, which are going to be pictured in a later slide. But I mean, we knew this going in because even the very first trailer showcased the idea, and of course the title gave us the same impression that this was going to be akin to Fusion, where it's like there's something relentless chasing you that you aren't powerful enough to defeat. How's that going to work? It was interesting. This didn't exactly go the way I thought it was going to. I have one major praise and one major complaint, and I can lead with either one.
Let's hear. Let me see. I want to hear the complaint. No. I know the complaint in a way, so I want to hear what you liked about it.
Okay. You may be surprised by the complaint, but we'll
okay.
see. I mean, I sort of alluded to it in the lead-up, but like bringing back that same feeling that Fusion did was great. Because Samus is awesome overall. Like, she's this badass solo bounty hunter who does everything. But to feel the same tension that she does is a pretty unique experience. And it's one that Fusion really nailed in the early going. But then pretty quickly you had enough upgrades to fend off the SAX. Maybe you couldn't do anything about it, but you could at least get away from it pretty easily. So that feeling of the very beginning of the game was never fully recaptured. Here, because the Emmys sort of upgrade over time, yes, you have more options to get away from them, but they also get more powerful. Like the ice one was the one that fucked me up the most. So I was still plenty like, oh god, here we go, another Emmy zone I have to go through. Yes, it was never quite the same as the first time. I don't know if you can ever really recapture that, but I thought the progression of those and the fact that I thought maybe this could just be my impression. I thought it was going to be like, oh, you have to go through like this section. You're going to go to a new area and then find your way through the Emmy section and then progress normally. No, you kept dipping in and out of these son bitches. In some ways, that was like the way to escape. Like, okay, I can get through this door, and then, oh god, I can't go any more this way. I have to go back and find another way. I really thought it was well executed,
and it was fun being tactical because there were times where you'd want to look at the map and be like, okay, I'm going to go in here. Let's see. Like, it looks like there's an exit to the top right, so I'm going to aim for that. And like, God help me. And it does replicate the, dread ding of that part. Every time I went in there, I was a little bit nervous. Heart started beating faster. Like, it worked for the most part. I think it was too punishing. And like we talked about, like you die and then you go right back to the beginning. It was not that big of a deal. It was not that frustrating, but because it was so fast, it almost became like it almost takes you out of the tension a bit. I wonder if it would have been better if it was just really, really, really damaging, but not just insta death. And eventually I got to the point where maybe 60% of the time I could break out. In the beginning of the game, I got caught. That was it. I didn't know what the timing was. It just killed me. So I don't know. Were you? There was one run I did 3 times in a row though, and that felt really good. So kicked out. But I thought it ruined the tension for me just a little bit.
I think it would have been an interesting compromise to make it like a 2-hit thing. So the first time it catches you, it drains you enough that you have like 1 health or something. So, like your margin of error is gone. I do think that it was at least segmented enough that wasn't as bad. If they had really connected these to where, we're talking like a solid minute of traversing. And if you screw up any of it, you're starting over. But most of those zones until a couple in the late game were like 15-second quick hitters. So I'm not sure I fully agree. I do get it though, and to some extent I do. I mean, it's just I think they gave you 2 chances to counter. Both of them were pretty tiny windows, but they existed. The first one a little bit more generous than the second. I hit it enough that I felt like I had a shot. It wasn't a 50-50, but I was at least like, okay. Sometimes even if I broke out, I was in such a bad position it didn't matter. There was occasions where I just let myself die anyways. Like I got in a really bad corner where it got me. And it's like, okay, especially the underwater ones. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to get over it. I can't jump. So I'm just going to, I know you can slide underneath, but I'm so slow that I'm not going to get away. So I'll just be like, yeah, just take my DNA. It's fine. Yeah. I don't want it.
I'm actually glad you brought it up. So the sequences, what was clever is that you had some flexibility and some freedom in getting around them. It reminded me of Samus Returns. You had sequences where you're escaping and like there's a specific thing that you have to do and it just takes you time after time after time to be like, oh, okay, so you have to get here, then you have to lay this bomb at this part while the screen is moving this way. It really, in so many ways, it feels like Samus Returns was like the test run for this game and allowed them to say like, okay, this worked pretty well, this other thing absolutely doesn't work, let's take it out.
Yeah, you can see the lessons they learned specifically from Samus Returns is the most, but there's a few things from other M in here. There's a few things from just past games in general, obviously, so it's not just those 2, but I like that they pretty much seem to have taken a lot of what was the best in the series so far. I think Jaguar brings up a strong point, too. We've talked about, we like the zones the size they were. I also think it works in reverse, because especially in the beginning, I was relieved to have areas where I was not going to be chased. In Fusion, the SAX could have come anywhere. Sometimes you can kind of tell the way the room was set up that it was telegraphed. But between the fact that they're in these specific zones and the whistle, which we'll probably talk about in the etc. section, that tips you off to them approaching, I thought it was it was like, okay, I know I'm going into this, so now, like you said, the heart rate goes up, and then when I get out, I can go, okay, I'm safe for a while because they can't walk through this door for reasons.
And then just when you start getting comfortable with the process, they throw that one where you have to go through a maze to get away from the Emmy, so it's not as straightforward as the other ones.
Yeah, essentially the last one, since you kill the last one with a new fancy power.
Which was awesome.
Yeah, which actually feels good at that point.
Yeah.
My complaint is actually with the first one. I don't think I like the decision to have you be able to kill the very first one you come across. I know it's damaged and kind of fucked up to begin with. That's the whole point. I'm not saying I hated it. But to me, I feel like the tension would have been even stronger if you can't even do anything about the first one for a little bit longer. Because, you get this once, I guess even when you're going through it, you don't really understand that, okay, this fancy Mega Beam is really only a one-time use. And they expand that later on because then you have to take out the plating for the ones that aren't damaged with the fancy machine gun. I I didn't dislike it, but I was like, man, it felt weird to come across this enemy, evade it for a little bit, and then just blow it to smithereens. I was like, I wish that moment had waited until after the first encounter.
I actually agree with you, because when the buildup of the game was the Emmy, like the whole, and we didn't even watch all the trailers, and we still knew like this was going to be this thing that hunted you, and then I killed it, and I was like, oh, well, they're not that tough. I mean, yeah, I know I have to get the whatever, and there's going to be more of them, but I agree with you, actually. It kind of almost was a letdown in a way, because I wanted this enemy to be this invincible force. But yeah, small quibble.
Yeah, it doesn't really hurt my enjoyment of the game. I don't think it's like, oh, I'm dying on this hill. I just felt like the first time you encountered it should have been like a narrow escape.
Yeah.
And not I mean, yeah, you still had to work your ass off and get around it and find the beam and do the stuff. So it wasn't like you didn't earn it, but I would have preferred that be the second time. I don't know how you would have made that work, but it wouldn't have been that hard of a tweak.
Yeah, exactly. Though in the comments, like the first Emmy is sort of like the first true Emmy encounter was sort of the second one that you get to, and then it just gets progressively more difficult from there, which I liked. Again, the difficulty was great. I thought and then if you really want to, you can play it on hard afterwards, which I think you're crazy if you do, but I'm glad that option's there for people.
Yeah, great. I'm probably not going to use it myself just because there's so much else to get to, but it's there if I ever wanted to go back to it.
Yeah.
I usually don't. When I do eventually circle back to a game, like hero mode on Wind Waker or something, I have it, but I just go back and play the original again.
This is probably one of the only Metroids that I'm going to go back and play again at some point, just because I think at the core of it, the gameplay just is so fun. So to wrap up the gameplay section, I think it's probably the best that Metroid's ever been. I'm not saying it's the best Metroid game ever, but it is the culmination of all of the gameplay advancements that they made throughout the years, and I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, and I think as a final point before we switch to story here, I think Soma's point's actually a good one. I may have solved it right away. I mean, folks in chat are talking about how like they kind of agree with us. Yeah, if you come across an undamaged enemy first, and then you can't do shit to it, and it pierces your core and steals your DNA multiple times, and you get out by the skin of your teeth, and then you come across a wounded one later, you're like, oh, maybe I can take this one out, and you can, and then you can apply that to the other ones, but it's a lot harder. Maybe that's the ticket. Maybe that's the difference that's just enough to make it feel a little more gratifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Alrighty, so story's not going to be a huge bullet point, but there is one, and I think it's worth talking about. Primarily, you have a antagonist that becomes pretty clear in the first 15 seconds, as seen on the screen, which is Ravenbeak. And of course the Emmys, but the Emmys are just sort of automatons, so you're not really you don't hate them. Maybe you resent them a little bit for killing you all the time, but they haven't done anything wrong. They're just robots that have been reprogrammed. So you really just have this sort of nebulous enemy that makes a grand appearance early and you don't really see again for a long time. But I didn't necessarily hate that. Again, we saw from Other M that the series is not at its best when it tries to shoehorn in a bunch of stories. I thought this was just enough at just the right moments. There's a little bit of cutscenes, one or two characters she can actually talk to in Chozo or in whatever. And that was enough. It didn't need to be more. I don't come into this looking for deep lore, but I thought the amount they had was pretty good.
Yeah, I saw a take that I did not agree with. Is like, the series has always been bad at storytelling, and this game lets it down. Like, and I was like, look, you don't go into Metroid expecting a ton of story. It really has always been about the lore surrounding it, and Metroid Prime, Citizen Kane of Gaming, is a really great example, because so much of the gaps you fill out by scanning stuff. So there's actually a pretty good story there if you want to go tell it. Otherwise, it's relatively straightforward, and that's fine. Yeah. So the little bit extra steps, this is probably the most certainly that a 2D one has ever had. The most story, and I thought it was really strong. I thought it was just enough for me to get through it and to care. There were a couple of sequences, I guess I shouldn't spoil, but I don't know how much we care. I'll just say it was a nice surprise bringing back old elements that played into this game, and when like they were first uncovered, it's like, oh, that's so cool.
We can spoil. You can turn off the stream for 5 minutes. We won't take very long. Just
the X coming back, and I probably could figure that they were going to, but the way that it happened, I was like, that's really neat. And I wasn't sure how much they were going to honor fusion, for example, in the story, and they did a lot. And then the whole finale sequence was like, holy shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to tie it in, and it's a nice way to sort of power up the world like you're gaining new ways to traverse and get to new areas, but this made the enemies tougher because they've all been infused with the X, and you see just how deadly it is and why it was so important to what we thought was eradicated infusion, because it just takes over everything. It just eats up hosts, including potential allies you might have once had who then get murdered horribly. And I actually thought that was going to come back and be a boss fight. I was really pleasantly surprised that it wasn't. In fact, it's the big assist at the end, which feels earned because, look, Samus is a complete badass who can do almost everything, but it makes sense that she might need a little assist from time to time.
And this, I guess this is sort of gameplay, but I consider it more of story. I loved the decision to... I thought we were getting away from what makes Metroid really great, and Corruption did this. It's like... there's a bunch of friends and you can like traverse the planet. And I was like, this isn't like why I play Metroid. This one, you're actually stuck in like the core and you're trying to work your way back to the surface. So it's almost inverting what you expect from a Metroid. And I just loved it. It felt very claustrophobic and you felt the weight. Someone talked about like the very beginning, get your ass kicked. Now you're in like the bottom layer of this this planet trying to work your way out. And I thought that was such a nice touch for the atmosphere of the story.
Yeah, and Adam doesn't even know where the hell you are or what happened to you, so he's trying to talk you through it, but he doesn't know anything either, so it's a great way to... those little snippets with him were great, just for pushing things along in a minimal way, because like you said, Corruption was a disaster. Here's your new friends, all of them are being corrupted, I know it's the title, and now you have to fight them all. That's the bosses of the game. Cool, no friends for Samus. Why do we bother thinking it was going to happen? One other touch I really liked, I guess falls under story. There was just little moments in the cutscenes that I think really make Samus look good. Like when she first encounters Kraid and he's all chained up and she's kind of like, this is weird. I know you. And he kind of like roars at her and tries to like strain the extent of his man. And she just blasts him in the fucking mouth. That's great. That's a really good little character moment that doesn't need exposition, doesn't need text or voiceovers. There's a few different moments like that, either before or during or after fights, that just makes it, Samus is a badass, and here's her doing cool things. You've earned it by getting to this point in the fight. Now you're going to get a fun thing on top of it in the cutscene, and then maybe there's more fight to come. But I thought it was a really good balance there.
Yeah, I agree. It was just, again, all those little touches, I thought it was the perfect touch. You know what I mean? Not too much, not overdoing it. Certainly no other M. Thank God, but not nothing. Like it wasn't like a Dark Souls where you have to put together all the pieces or you have no idea what's going on. That was a pretty deft touch.
That's about it for story. I don't have a whole lot else to say, but the ending's open-ended enough that they can continue this if they want to. They can go back to earlier points in the timeline, but to me, it makes sense to keep going from here. And we'll see. I mean, the game has done exceedingly well. I think it's got to be over 1 million copies now because the last number I saw was like 900 something. And that's very good for this franchise, which is a great sign if we want to see more of it.
Is this the first Metroid that did not include a Metroid? Now you can say, Samus is a Metroid, but like, come on, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't know if all the Prime ones... Echoes probably didn't have a Metroid. I don't know if Corruption did. I never finished it.
I don't remember Corruption. Okay. I beat it. It's probably the least noteworthy entry in the series. I mean, technically, I watched somebody else play other M's, so that doesn't really count. But it's rare for sure.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool, and we'll see. I want to see. So they started building this infusion. I want to see her go against the Galactic Federation because clearly they're a bunch of dicks.
Yeah, their leadership of the galaxy fucking sucks.
Yeah, like it's terrible.
Well, we thought this was going to happen, and we fucked up, so we sent Samus in to fix it, and then she got hurt, so we tried to something else, and we fucked up, so we sent Samus in to fix it after she got a fluke recovery, and now this one's the worst of all. It's like, we dispatched some enemy robots, they got taken over, so the whole planet's a death trap, but Samus, hey, if you could just go fix everything, and Samus's DNA is like half X, half Metroid, half Ravenbeak, half whatever the fuck. I mean, at a certain point, she's got to get fed up with the Federation.
Yeah, I mean, they made her powerful, but she's also like, what have you done to me at this point?
And have they? Because hell, the Chozo upgrades are the majority of what makes Samus tick.
That's true. Yeah.
So, like, what has the Federation done for her other than get in the way?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's certainly looking a little grim, so that'd be a lovely way to go about a future story.
So I did not necessarily notice that, but that's a pretty good segue. So, apparently, when she points her cannon, there's a locking on sound effect from Prime. So I think little touches like that, and we've talked about it before with the sequence breaking and some other things. Really nice touch, but I really did. I loved all the sound effects, and I don't usually talk about like sound effects, but they were so noteworthy in this, and I just like they really got to me.
You have to nail it. It's a game about ambiance most of the time. Yes, there's a soundtrack, and there's a couple of things that I thought were pretty good on it, but for the most part, you're going through things that are relatively quiet, and all you're going to hear are these different sound cues. At first, I thought the little like chattering, squeaky, whistly kind of noise the Emmys made was annoying, but I started to appreciate it because, again, you always got that sense of like, oh, there's that noise again, so I know what's coming. All the blasters and beams and various like missiles and stuff all had satisfying sound effects. Design-wise, I'm surprised it's this polished. I guess I shouldn't be anymore. Nintendo's really good about dropping these, but we only found out about this, 4 or 5 months ago? Obviously, it was in development before that. But this isn't a title that we've known was coming for a long time that had an extended development window. It's a 2D and not a 3D, so the task is a little bit easier, but nonetheless, I'm like, this is just really super polished overall.
Well, I was expecting like another Samus Returns, and everything I've talked about makes it seem like I hate that game. I really didn't. I think it's solid, but this game is so bounds and leaps ahead of that game in terms of pretty much everything, but noteworthy polish. It is so polished. All the gameplay stuff that we talked about. It looks so fantastic, though. And again, this is like this movement where we got away once 3D started. We were like, everything has to be 3D. We can't go back to 2D. It's like, look at what a 2D game can do. It can look absolutely beautiful. The music can still be great. It can be colorful and dynamic. And I just thought this was a showcase for what is still possible in this format.
And I thought coming into the game's release, there were some screenshots, there were a couple of trailers. I stayed away from most things because I was already getting the game. So it wasn't like I needed to be sold on it. But I did think, looking at the screenshots, I'm like, I don't know how well this works. The screenshots don't do it justice. Mm-hmm. It's just like there are some people who are more attractive in photos and some people who are more attractive when you see them either in person or in motion. When the game's moving, it looks phenomenal. Really good work on some of the background details. Everything about Samus. I actually really like this suit. I don't know what I like. I like having it more like putting on shoulder plates in the light as opposed to just being like a whole other suit on top. Something about this design I thought worked really well.
It was like it reminded me. I keep thinking of like it was like Apple inspired. There's like it's Samus's suit, but then you got like the white like Apple plates, and I was like, that's cool. I like that. And they kind of persisted throughout the different suits and the variations. So it was very. It made it unique to this game.
And I don't know a way to describe this without it seeming like I'm going down this weird sexist route, but it is just feminine enough that it makes perfect sense.
Well, again, we talked about this in our like best characters. It's like when you analyze a strong female character and you look at it and you're like, yeah, she's strong because she's just a guy. And it's like, well, that's not exactly like feminist. That's actually it's actually anti-feminist. You want them to still be feminine to be a strong feminine character. And I would agree with you. It's like you can tell like she's a woman. They go into her eyes. Like you can tell that she's her. It's not just like, yeah, she's basically a man. You
get glimpses of her face. The eyes tell a big story. That's another big part of like the story component we didn't mention. It's just they zoom in on her visor and she reacts to stuff in a really good way. Just the suit in general. It's like that's being worn by a woman. It doesn't have to be Zero Suit Samus status. We don't have to go that route. Mm-hmm. But just in general, the design, like, yeah, like Samus is a woman. Great. You can actually sort of kind of tell, but not in a way that's obnoxious or on the nose. It's a weird thing, but it was an impression that I had where I was just like, this is like the best version of the suit we've had.
Yeah. It was great. And I thought her design was great. A lot of the enemies' designs were great. Scary when they needed to be, intimidating. I loved it. But like it made sense in the biology of things and when they started getting like corrupted and things like that. Just a really great like design, a creative design for the whole game.
Text message. All right, I guess it's time to score. It's been about 45 minutes. Seems appropriate. We can always give final thoughts.
I haven't even thought of the score. I want if y'all want to give us your scores.
Yeah, for anybody who's beaten in the chat, there's several of you in there. I know at least a couple of you have. We'll give your scores and maybe a short bit on why. We'll talk about it.
We score out of 10, so don't give it like a letter grade or like a number of bananas or whatever. Like it's out of 10.
It's a 7.8. There's too much water.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but kind of.
It's actually true. I liked it a lot. I'm trying to think of like major flaws. We talked about a little bit. There is a lot of water. The ME stuff worked, but like not perfectly.
Yeah.
I'm going to say like a 9.3 because it's really good. It represents some of the best gameplay that this series has ever had. And I mean, more than anything, it has me excited for the next game. I don't know how often in this series past that I finished it and been like, I'm really jonesing for the next one now. It's like, that was good, and that's fine. This one, I can't wait for the sequel to Dread.
Yeah, I think it's a testament to how good a series can be, a game in a series can be, because like Persona 5 left that same impression. I was sad it was over, and I'm like, well, if I liked 3, and then 4 was better, and then 5 was more better, like, what is 6 going to be like? Oh my god, I can't wait for Persona 6, even though it's going to be, years, probably still. So this was kind of similar, where it was like, it's been so long since we've had one that it scratched an itch that I didn't really know I was missing, because at a certain point it gets dulled. There's no longer an itch if it's been 14 years. You're just like, I missed that, but I'm not eager to play it because it's not going to happen. But given the success of this, it feels inevitable that there's going to be more to come. We also know, in theory, there's a Metroid Prime 4 in development. They made a huge mistake by announcing that and then doing absolutely nothing with it for like 2 years. Don't know what the plan was there, but they're not alone in having done that. Elder Scrolls 6. So, there's precedence for it. This, especially given the turnaround time in the studio that worked on it, maybe we get another one in a couple years. And I'm excited for it. Yeah. I'll give my score, and then we can go through what the folks in chat are saying. I don't really go in between halves, so I'd probably give it a 9, although it's close. But I don't think it's quite a 9.5. I think we talked about all the reasons why it succeeds. There's a couple of powers that I feel like don't really work in this game. Power bombs, I think, especially, have been too tied to smart exploration. So to get them as basically the last item in the game, it's like, basically, I'm going to use these to get more of these, but I don't really need these for one more fight.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know if that really felt rewarding as far as being an exploration reward. Because, you get other items and that's it. You don't really upgrade the speed booster or whatever. You get that and you're not going to upgrade it later. It's just an item you have. Power bombs you get so late that I don't really feel like it's incentivized.
It had a little bit of that of Twilight Princess syndrome. I want to say maybe the space jump or something. Like, you get this jump and you're like, cool, but then you get the screw attack later, which is just a space jump, but like infinitely better. So like, why?
Well, this one's especially bad because it's spin boost, which is just a second jump, and then space jump, which is just an infinite jump, and then the screw attack, which is just you can't be hurt during it, invincible jump. Now, the screw attack and space jump thing has been a problem in multiple games in this series, where it just doesn't really feel great when you get both separately. But this one was especially bad because I get the spin boost and I'm like, okay, I already know I'm going to get at least the screw attack later. What is this?
Yeah.
So there's a couple little things. Again, it's all nitpicky. For like we've talked before, like when we do reviews, we're always going to do the criticism just because it's more interesting than heaping praise on a game. But little stuff like that, there are so many tiny details that are really good that it just, I think, makes it stand out more about the little things they didn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a 9 because I can't quite go 9.5. If I was doing decimals, it'd probably be right around at yours, like a 9.2 or something.
And it's weird because I want to give it a 9.2. That feels right. Because I have so little wrong with it, I feel like I should want to give it like a 9.5 or higher, but like there's something that's preventing me. So maybe like Doug said, DLC. Although I will say, Doug gave it an 8.5. This is the guy who didn't use power bombs in the final boss. So I don't know how much we can trust his judgment,
Yeah, and I gotta say, it's just weird thinking about Metroid DLC because the series has been buried for so long that it's basically not existed in a time of DLC. When Fusion came out, DLC wasn't a common practice, and you weren't going to put DLC on a Game Boy Advance game. Wasn't going to happen, right? So, like, it's just kind of strange to even consider the possibility. There's certainly avenues there if they wanted to. I would think they would have already had a plan for it, but maybe the success of the game will make them rethink it. I don't know.
I just can't believe the game was this good. I think it had a lot going against it. It had become almost a meme in itself, like Metroid Dread. Yeah, like that other game will come out at the same time Metroid Dread does, like would never, because it's in development hell and it's just never going to happen. And then to get this, I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I'm very happy.
Like you said, I think everything's always relative to expectations. I came into this with reasonably high, but I was also like, it's just been so long. Other M hurt me. What is this going to be? And so to have that bar comfortably cleared with room to spare is really nice.
Yeah.
Other scores in the chat, I saw Soma with a 9.5, agreeing with a lot of what we said. We'll talk about the 10 thing in a second. Chakrock with a 9. Yeah, so I don't think this dethrones Super Metroid. I don't even know like how you compare them. Like, yes, they're both 2D Metroid games, but they're such starkly different eras that like the gameplay in this is miles ahead of Super Metroid. So in that respect, this game blows that out of the water. But Super Metroid, for its time, to me, is still really impressive at a technical standpoint. So that's tough.
Well, I just think it's for its time and how much it's endured the test of time. Like, people are still playing it, speedrunning it. That's tough. It's hard to compare those two. But that's the echelon we're talking about. Is like, this is among the very best the series has ever offered. And what a sentence to say about this game.
Yeah, and this is a series with some like huge successes. You mentioned Prime jokingly as the Citizen Kane thing from IGN, but like Prime, Super Metroid, and Fusion are all really, really good games.
Yep.
And there are other games in the series that people enjoy that are also quite good. I don't know if they'd rise to that level, but so to stick out among that crowd is commendable. This isn't like a series where you have 1 or 2 really good games and the rest suck, so of course those look good by comparison. There's some tough company here.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, this is top 3. This beats out Fusion, and so it's like this, Prime, and Super Metroid, and then I can fight to the death with whoever on those 3. But that's where I'm at.
Makes sense. And again, I mean, for folks who might be newer, who are either listening or watching, like 10s don't come easily. Not from the two of us. We joked with Mikhail, although she's also
Mikhail
not.
She doesn't do that
anymore.
10. It's like, you haven't even beaten it yet.
Yeah. It's either a 10 or a 0, but she's not really like that anymore. That was the ongoing joke years ago. For us, I think both of us come at it from the same approach, which is like a 10 has to be an absolute masterpiece. Not perfect, because there's no such thing. But I mean, if we were making a list of 10s, how many would you have? 3? 4? Like Persona 5 is a 10.
I have to think about it. I was going to say
Chrono Trigger's a 10 for me, probably not for you.
Yeah. I would have a handful, but not a lot. It's so hard. Metal Gear Solid 5, I would give it a 10, but there's no ending. And I've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
So, like, a game has to be perfect. You know how hard that is?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I mean, so a 9.2, or you said, I think a 9, like, that's damn good.
That's a huge score.
Yeah.
Conversely, we also don't give super low scores very often. Like, I think what was the last thing we ripped into? Where like you and me and Dave all gave something like a 5 or below. You remember? There was something a few months ago.
The only thing I could imagine doing that with was when we do like the then and now segments, because we usually don't waste our time with like, why would we review like Barbie and Ken's convertible adventures? Like there's no point. We know it's gonna suck. Why waste our time?
It's probably a movie. It was Space Jam 2.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
But it's pretty, like, we don't waste our time on shit. And
Yeah.
we're certainly not going to talk for 30 to 60 minutes about shit, even if we do happen to go through something that's bad. So we're also not going to give a lot of scores below a 6 because we're not going to waste our time on it. But the subtleties within that range mean a lot to us. So a 9 plus, doing something right. Will it win Game of the Year? I don't give a fuck about the Game Awards.
Yeah.
It's going to get some Game of the Year nods from the 60 million publications that do it, and that's good enough for me.
It's going to be in our top 5. Or my top 5. I don't know if it's going to be in your top 5, but we're going to do it.
It almost assuredly will be.
Our Game Awards matter more than anybody else's for that regard. So
That's
they don't
true.
matter, Chris, you're right, until it comes to ours. Soma, that's a good point. And you're not alone in making it a letter grade. I think IGN eventually just got fed up. They're like, we're doing away with essentially the 20-point scale. It's too much.
I mean, I get it, but it's like, to me, that's too nebulous then. Because then what's
It's
an
not
A?
enough. Yeah.
Everything from a 9 to a 10 is an A. Like, I want there to be differences in that tier to me. Because Persona 5 is not the same as something that just sneaks into the 9 tier,
That's what I'm saying. And now IGN is running into that too. It's because they are getting unfair criticism, but they're like, oh, another 8 from IGN. It's like, well, that can happen when there's not a lot of diversity.
It's not a
in the
9.
scores.
They're certainly not going to give it a 10.
Yeah.
A 7 is like a failure, so it's
Exactly.
going to be a lot of B's. A lot of B's.
Yep.
So I think a half and maybe even the decimal points. Again, it's all arbitrary, but I like where we've settled over time.
Yeah.
So we're going to head out. One programming note, as we do so, there will be no show next week because it's the week of Thanksgiving. Even though it's a Tuesday that we're recording them and doing them live now, we're still just going to skip the week. So we'll be back November 30th, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, with a regular show. As one final note, Shackrock, thank you for saying that. We are doing the Ace Attorney games, the most recent ones. So the ones with our old pal Ryo Nosuke Naruhodo. We're almost done with the first one, although you can argue that they're really all just one giant game.
It's just one. It's part 1, part 2.
It really is. It's just 10 cases of one game, and they're all so connected that you can't look at it any other way. But we intend to keep going through that. Michaela is just getting into case 5, so it's about to start really taking off, in my opinion. So you can check out our YouTube channel for that. The usual plugs at the end, in between shows, objectionnetwork.com, youtube.com/objectionnetwork.
And
anything to say real quick before
outro? Thanks everybody for participating. It was really, really great participation this week, and it's awesome. I think it makes the show so much more fun for us and hopefully for you too. So thank you so much.
Likewise, it's always nice to have folks tuning in. It adds a new dimension to a show that we were just going to do in this exact format anyways. Whether we were live or not, nothing's changed. We used to do it in segments and splice them all together, and those days are long since over.
Yeah, count down each segment.
Oh, God, yeah. And then put in a fake news read for headlines, and I would even write down the intro because I didn't want to botch it. So I here's my paragraph of text.
Absolutely.
And it didn't sound very good. I'm not really good at reading canned text. I'm much better at going off the cuff.
Yeah.
So that's it, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Remember, no show next week, but back on the 30th. We'll see you then.